Hello, I'm Robert. I'm helping if you're scared of many things by fact checking. And this time it's about what's going to happen tomorrow on May the 9th. And the best guess is it's probably going to be quite low key because the messaging from Russia has been really dialing back expectations. And it's not too surprising when you look at what's been happening in their war. So, from Putin's point of view, it must be a really quite surprising, quite like disappointing from his point of view. This is where they were on April the 6th, and it was clear they sent massive amounts of soldiers into the battles there, and they had huge movements in trying to move mass amounts of supplies. They ended up with 22,000 people in Izium there, soldiers, and they just didn't manage to make any advances against the Ukrainians. As you can see, well, almost nothing. And Ukraine is now pushing back. You see that blue bit there? That's Ukraine pushing back. And there's a little bit there of Ukraine pushing back in the middle of the coastal strip. Then here, trying to push towards Odessa, then Ukraine has just stopped them and they haven't been able to go any further. They've been trying to get the whole of the Kherson Oblast pretty much since the war, since from April the 6th, and they've made no progress. They've made a little bit of fattening out of the coastal belt around Mariupol and a little bit of fattening out of this area, but they've really done hardly anything. And that's his big escalation. So people are saying, well, look, Russia's just about to do a big escalation on May the 7th. Well, Russia's been trying to escalate for over a month now. And they've just not got it. They've just not got what it takes to escalate, even in Ukraine. So there's absolutely no way that Russia is about to announce it's going to attack NATO. I mean, NATO, I've talked about this before, so I don't want to go into great detail now, but NATO has like hundreds of its F-35 fighter jets, which are the new fighter jets. Russia's equivalent, it's only got 12. And Russia's even more difficult for Russia is they've got an ancient style of battling, of doing war that goes back to the Soviet era. They have for instance, their planes, their planes, they will launch from Russia. They've no longer got planes flying from airports in Ukraine. All their planes launch from Russia. And they're just not safe to launch from Ukraine because they'd be attacked by the Ukrainians. So the Russians, their fighter jets launch from Russia, and they've got some target. They'll go as quickly as possibly can to that target. They're told in advance what they've got to do. They'll bomb it. So they're going to bomb. So for instance, they've been sending lots of jets to bomb the Avastal Steelworks. So they'll say, go to the Avastal, bomb them, and then come back. And that's all the plane does. And during the time, they might drive over a tank column, for instance. They might drive over a lot of tanks that Ukraine is moving to the front line. And even in daytime, Ukraine can move their armoured tanks and their armoured anti-artillery and so on around. And they don't need to worry about the fight. They'll see a Russian fighter jet fly over, and they're just going off to do the bombing that they were told to do in advance. And they're not going to bother to distract themselves to shoot this nice juicy target below them. So the Ukrainians are just moving around in daytime without being harmed. So Russia doesn't really have control of the skies at all. It's just got the ability to do very fast one-off strikes. And this is a thing that someone was commenting very recently, and then go back again. And then they've got a very top-down structure that the Ukrainian commanders, they order the Ukrainian generals right up at the top, the only ones that really do any strategy. And they just tell everyone on the ground, you've got to go there, you've got to go there. It's like playing a game of chess or something. And that's why the generals they've got 20 generals, and different counts, but some say that 12 of them have been killed, because they have to go to the front line to look at what the situation is like on the ground. And then they tell the soldiers what to do, and then they go back to their command posts outside in Russia, and then they say, well, then they've got to go to the front line again and have another look at what's going on, because they just are not set up for the commanders on the ground to make independent decisions, because you need to. It takes quite a lot of learning, and people aren't natural commanders, so the officers on the field, they're used to just obeying and saying, and they've got to give the orders that they were told by their general, and it's likely to take them years to change this. They're not going to change this in weeks, and they make numerous very bad mistakes in this war, and it doesn't seem like they're going to change them. They've changed some minor things, they've changed, but they're not doing very well. And then they've got ancient equipment, so they've got these. They're now equipping tanks with helmets, and they're equipping their military vehicles with tires from the Soviet era, decades old. And some of them actually say made in USSR in English, because they were clearly meant to be exported to India, and it was supposed to requirements or something, and they've got them in their backup store somewhere, and these are now ending up on the front line against the Ukrainians with their modern NATO weapons. And so, and I've done a transcript here where they're saying that one of the can't solve this with, so we can't solve that with conscripts, because they won't have and the conscripts. So Ukraine has got 20,000 people, I think, have come to Ukraine, foreign fighters, including expat Ukrainians, including Israeli fighters, and other properly trained modern fighters. I'm not talking about amateurs. I'm not talking about people who have to be trained up. They've been surging to Ukraine to help them fight, and joining and nationalizing themselves as Ukrainians, and then becoming part of the Ukrainian army. And Russia doesn't have that. And then there was this military analyst on Russian TV, and he's pointing out all these problems. And then this is my transcript of what he said. And he said, let's suppose that we have the sound of fanfare and the mobilization. So this is the idea that Russia could try and solve its problems by mobilizing lots of raw recruits. Well, apart from the problem that they wouldn't know how to fight, they've never been trained. And he doesn't have, he asks, when can we get our first fighter aviation regiment? He says, not until New Year's. And don't have the reserves, we don't have the pilots, and they don't have the planes. And this is an expert, a military expert in Russia. If we order new ships, when will we get the first one? In 2 years. So they've lost 12 ships in the Black Sea. One of them are very big, and then the two best ships in the Black Sea, including the flagship, have both been sunk. The second one it seems pretty much confirmed. And they can't even get ships into the Black Sea at the moment, because Turkey controls the Bosporus Strait, and so it's just saying you can't go in. And so they've got a finite number of ships in the Black Sea, and they can't build any new ones for 2 years. And what about a new tank division? He said you could get a new tank division ready in 90 days, but it wouldn't be equipped with one weaponry. That would be getting stuff that I was talking about from the Soviet era stuff. So this is a general on Russian TV on a talk show saying there's no point in mobilizing because they wouldn't achieve anything. So basically Russia has lost. It's just a matter of how soon he realizes that he's lost. He's not going to escalate. There's no way in this situation he's going to escalate. So then I just go down to the nukes. I'll talk quick. Maybe you've probably been worrying about the nukes. So this hits. So it's just not going to. If you look at the loss of soldiers, the loss of equipment, you're losing about 1 battalion a day of soldiers and of equipment, all the tanks and the anti-aircraft and all the things that a battalion would have. You lose that much equipment every day. Russia does, and unlike the Ukraine side, they don't have NATO and they don't have experienced soldiers coming in and helping them. So they started off with 200,000. They're using maybe 1,000 every day. You can't keep that up for long. So not all dying, a lot of them out of action in other ways. And then so far, because he hasn't declared that it's a war, then the soldiers are free to even the actual paid professional soldiers are free to resign. And if they resign, they're never going to get a good job in the military again. They probably have some problems getting good jobs anyway. But some of the soldiers on the Russian side are saying, well, this was just, so many people are dying, and I just don't see any future in this. It's just not going to work. And so they're resigning as professional soldiers. And of course conscripts, many of them, but it's quite a lot, quite a few professional soldiers are resigning because it's not a war. And so that's about the only reason that Putin would declare it a war, maybe to stop the professional soldiers from resigning. But he's, it's a vague possibility he might tell the Russian people it's a war, but then the problem is that he's then committed, and he's gradually dawning to him, surely, that he's losing this. So as it is now, there's no way that Putin can use nukes to get his way out of this. So he could, and the CIA don't see any practical evidence of even potential use of tactical nukes. That's the latest intelligence as of yesterday, I think it is. The very most recent intelligence. And this is hugely misreported, and it was misreported again yesterday. It was very much reported last time. That's the CIA Director Burns. That's been his consistent message all the way along. But he's been very badly misreported, and that's what he's saying. Very, very clear. We don't see, as an intelligence community, practical evidence at this point of Russian planning for the deployment or even potential use of tactical nuclear weapons. So deployment doesn't mean using them. Deployment means moving them to where they can be used, like moving them to the front lines into Ukraine, for instance, or to the Russian border where they could be fired into Ukraine, more likely to the Russian border. Russia has some very big tanks, and if they would have to use the very big tanks to fire tactical nukes, and they could fire them from the Russian border quite a distance in, because they're the very biggest tanks. Or maybe they'd drive them in, but that would be deployment, would be to drive up the Russian border with a tactical nuke and say to the, you can put this into your tank if you want, on some site, if we ordered you to. And CIA don't see anything like that. They're just not doing it. So the CIA are very good intelligence, they're remarkable intelligence all the way through. So I don't know how they know, but they seem pretty confident that they haven't moved the tactical nukes to the front line. The tactical nukes just like other kinds of shells, so but obviously would have to tell everyone concerned that these shells are actually tactical nukes, and they're not seeing that. So and remember, they knew before the invasion. Biden was warning about it long before the Winter Olympics. So, and it's exceptionally unlikely that they use tactical nukes. I explained that before, just very quick summary. The tactical nuke, you talk about something much smaller even than Hiroshima and Nagasaki. You're talking about, it can be dialed down to just a fraction of a kiloton. It can be dialed down just a little bit bigger than the mother of all bombs, which is the big bomb, biggest conventional bomb that's ever been used in war, I think. So it's just about the same size if you dial them down. And if you do them kind of normal value, then it's 1 kiloton. And if you have 1 kiloton and someone dropped it on the airport, and you're at the other end of the runway, for instance, suppose you were in a plane at the far end of the runway. If you're inside the plane, it would be protected from the radiation, any radiation fallout, and the plane wouldn't be damaged. It would probably still be able to take off, I think, at that distance from a tactical nuke. A small tactical nuke, and even if you're standing out of doors, as long as the wind was blowing away from you, or you got into a plane or got into some shelter and before the fallout got to you, then you wouldn't even get radiation sickness. So that's what a tactical nuke is like, and Russia would need to use dozens of those to get the equivalent of Mariupol, which they did with all the shelling. So there's it is, if tactical nukes were regarded as acceptable in modern warfare, then Russia could achieve some things more quickly with tactical nukes, perhaps. But it couldn't win with tactical nukes suddenly, and it would immediately get Russia, get NATO sending in their F-35s, and the whole thing would be over for Russia if they did that, surely. but or something. But even if Russia was to detonate a single tactical nuke, not in Ukraine, but in Siberia somewhere, one of the Siberian islands or something, then that would be an absolute disaster for Russia. Not because it would be attacked back. That would be a disaster because both China and India would then not be able to support even the limited support. They wouldn't even be able to stay neutral as they're trying to do. So they're finding it so difficult to stay neutral with all the watch up of Russia and all the awful things and the war crimes and everything. But they wouldn't be able to do that if Russia was to drop a tactical nuke anywhere in the world, even on Russia, just as a demonstration. That would be just, that would be beyond the pale. They would then have to say, we can't accept this, because they're both concerned about nuclear neighbours, Pakistan and Ukraine and China. Just it's got a no first strike. Anyway, I talked about all that with potential use of tactical nukes. So that just don't worry about that. There's no way that they're going to use tactical nukes. But it's exceedingly stupid. Putin has been very stupid. So it's a matter of, is he stupid enough to do this? But the CIA don't see any evidence that he is doing it. So it's vanishingly unlikely that to just about zero chance that he does that. And then people worry about the Doomsday plane. Well, it makes no sense to fly over Moscow. So the Doomsday plane, it's just a name for it. It's not a literal doomsday. Even a nuclear war isn't literally a doomsday. And so millions would survive even all that war, which I'm not going to have. And I'm not from the Ukraine war. And there is always the risk of someone making a mistake. And that's the main thing people worry about. But Putin has been careful. He didn't really raise his nuclear alert level. That would have been risking a mistake, but he didn't really raise it. His nukes aren't all ready to deploy it in a few minutes or anything like that. The United States, they don't see him changing like that. And normally the nukes at sea in nuclear submarines, they take a couple of days to prepare if you're not on high alert. And it's hours to days. I think it's days. I'm not sure for the ICBMs. Certainly hours and probably days. The ICBMs too, if you're not at high alert. And Russia isn't at high alert. And NATO isn't at high alert. And so the Doomsday plane, I'm not sure. I think they have to move to high alert before they get to the point where they could respond in minutes. So the Doomsday plane, it's just Putin showing off, and that's just a name. It's not really a Doomsday. And he did it last 2010, was it, or something? And people worry, and they're sort of saying, well, if the Doomsday plane is flying, that means Putin's going to be in it, and that means he thinks Moscow is going to be nuked. And how would that make any sense? What kind of celebration would that be? What kind of victory day would that be if Moscow gets nuked? So it doesn't make sense that he's risking Moscow being nuked, or thinks he's risking Moscow being nuked, and that's why he's flying this Doomsday plane. That would not be a victory celebration. And it's highly unlikely that he'd actually be in it. He's just showing it off, because he's got to make all his speeches and things. How could he do that from the plane? So it's not very likely he's even in it. I'll just be flying, saying, "Look, here's my plane, and if I need to, I can get into it, and it can come and pick me up." That's basically what he'd be doing. And now, the Mariupol. So the main things that Russia could do, that people have suggested, but Russia's done so badly that these are all really looking not that likely. So Russia themselves have walked back and saying they're not going to be sending officials to Mariupol, and they're not going to have victory celebrations there, which they were planning for. But it turns out it's just too difficult. So far, as far as I know, I have to double check, but these singers, not the singers, the soldiers They sing a rather quiet, beautiful song. I don't know about what the words are, but a quiet, soft-sounding song, and they've just been in this clip which you can listen to. It's rather beautiful. No idea what the words are saying, but they'd just been they're just back from the fighting, and they fought off another round of Russian soldiers trying to take the Azov-style steelworks. And what happened is that the electrician that used to work for the steelworks told the Russians how to find the secret tunnel entrances. He may have been tortured or something, who knows? But anyway, that's why the Russians are now trying to try to get in there. But the Ukrainians say that all the women and children have left the facility. They don't say if all the civilians have, so I don't know if there are any civilian men in there. But obviously not the woman fighter. She's got a rifle in her hands there when she's singing, so she's one of the soldiers. Just with it, they're all carrying soldiers ready to shoot back if someone finds them. So, but they were just singing in a quiet moment, and so they are still holding the Azov Steelworks. At least last I knew, I checked just before I started this video, and most of the civilians, the women and children, according to the Ukrainians, are out of it, and that leads to the big issue. Would Russia use chemical weapons? That's the only way that they could win this quickly, is to pour chlorine down into the tunnels, and then that would force the soldiers up, or some of them die. And that's regarded as being illegal with modern warfare. That goes back to World War One, in mustard gas in World War One. That's not illegal. That's illegal now. And Russia did stand by while Assad used chlorine to push out what's that thing called, Aleppo. So they used similar scorched earth tactics with Aleppo, and the Russians used that to flatten all the buildings. They flattened it all the way to rubble, and then the soldiers were still there, kind of shooting back from the rubble, from underground shelters. And then at that point, the Russians went in and they used chlorine to force, not the Russians, the Syrians under Assad went in and used chlorine, and Russia didn't stop them. So that's one thing, to just not stop the Syrians from using chlorine. But it's another thing, and a completely different matter for Russia itself to use chlorine to force out the soldiers, because that would be, or more advanced chemical weapons. Chlorine is very heavy, so it sinks into the ground. Methane doesn't work, ammonia doesn't work. It floats in air unless the air is very, very damp. But chlorine sinks, and that's why it could be used to get into tunnels. So that would be the main concern. If Russia did that, then I think that's another thing. If they did that to kind of trying to clear out the Azov-style steelworks before May the 9th, I hope they don't do that. I mean, that's my main concern. If they did that, then that would surely turn China and India against them as well. It'd be so very blatant. And so probably they're not going to take Azovstal, so they're not going to take Mariupol by tomorrow. It's unlikely, because it's extremely difficult. It's got a maze of underground nuclear bunkers and tunnels joining them together, and probably Ukrainians have made new tunnels, and as long as they've got water, they don't look like they're in famine mode, like you've seen victims of famines in countries like Ethiopia, way back when they had these horrible famines. And most people don't realise that unless you've got something like diabetes, you have to be like that before you're starving. So these soldiers don't look like they're starving yet, and as long as they've got enough water, then they can probably, but getting weaker as it goes, they can probably still fight. So, and they may have more food than they're letting on about, but if you think about people who do try to starve, do what they call them, food, not eating food demonstrations in prisons. I'm not coming up with the right word. Sometimes I don't get the right word to my mind. I think that's the thing that happens when you get a little bit older. It's not Alzheimer's. It's just as you get a little bit older, your mind gets a little bit slower. Things like that. It might be that. So what is it? What is the word? Hunger strike. Hunger strike. There you are. So I got to it in about 10 seconds, and when I was 20, it would probably take me about 2 seconds or something if I got a word that I wasn't thinking about. But it can happen to anyone. I've always been a little bit absent-minded, so I don't know if that is really even my old age. But so the people on hunger strike, if you remember, they usually go for weeks before they get into a serious situation. So anyway, so that's Mariupol. So it looks unlikely that Russia is going to declare that they've captured Mariupol. That doesn't seem very likely that they're going to declare that tomorrow, because it's just too risky. And they've only left 2,000 soldiers in charge of the whole of Mariupol. And then, so there is some risk. Professor Philip O'Brien, who's one who I follow, seems to be very knowledgeable about all this. He's a historian of military, professor of military history, obviously modern military history, and he just seems very well up on strategy, and he also knows ancient strategy as well, and he just seems to understand strategy very well, and know very well where the Russians are going wrong, and he sees it in advance before it happens and things. So I've been following him, and anyway, it doesn't. Yes, I forgot what I was saying there. It doesn't seem like they're going to go to. It doesn't seem like they're going to take Mariupol. Oh yes, he was saying that 2,000 seems very little to keep hold of Mariupol, given that many of the civilians in Mariupol, and just about all civilians, are against the soldiers. I mean, still, 2,000 soldiers could keep 100,000 civilians in place, and that's not impossible. But then, with a bit of help from Ukrainians, then you could tip it. So he's wondering, remember we've got some resistance not that far from I don't know what that is, demonstrations or something. I'm not quite sure what it is. That little blue patch there, it's not that far. And then they're not that far in the is that Mariupol somewhere there? And they're going down the Ukrainians are there, and they've got a very long distance. So maybe at some point in the war they'll retake Mariupol. It's not impossible that these people do hold out, given that Russia's turned its attention away. And they could hold out all the way to that. But we'll see. But so anyway, yes. So I'll go up to this map and I'll look at the other things, and then I'll just close it. So they might declare the oblast, the Kherson Oblast, if I'm saying that the right way, which is north of Crimea, and they took that over rather quickly and not so horrifically as Mariupol. And they, but even so, they've treated the people there very badly. They've, as they've done everywhere. There's nowhere in this region, except maybe some areas of Luhansk perhaps, that they've treated people well. And that's not the way. That's what some of these people are saying. Military analysts are saying that even if they did declare the Kherson a new oblast, how are they going to keep it under control? They're going to have to keep soldiers in place there indefinitely. Several battalions in Kherson just to keep it in control and keep all the civilians in control for decades into the future, if that's their plan. Or they deport millions of people to concentration camps. I mean, both of those don't seem very plausible. So it's hard to see what their end game is. And anyway, and we hear in a place like Izium, we hear that the same story as north of Kiev, that the civilians have been in basements for a month and not being able to and cut off from food, water, and electricity. So it seems everywhere they're doing these things. And so and then as they push back around Kherson here, and the towns they liberated, the same story. It seems to be happening everywhere. That they're just treating these civilians there really, really badly. and that is not the way to win their hearts and minds. And so they're declaring independence of Kherson, but the people in Kherson don't. If they'd done it differently, with Crimea and with Eastern Donbass and with Eastern Donetsk and Eastern Luhansk, they did it differently originally. But now they're going around, even the Eastern Donetsk and the Eastern Luhansk, they're going around and they're press ganging, like going back when the Navy would they used but they are effectively press ganging. They are, as soon as a young man goes on the street and he's got a job, maybe looking after the power station or something, and the Russians just say, "Oh, you're a young man, you've got to go off to the front line." And they've even conscripted one of the best piano virtuoso from Luhansk or Donetsk, who was he was told, I can't remember which it was, and he was told that he needed to come for a video, to record a video for Russia, and it turned out to be a press gang, and then he ended up on the front line and he was killed. That happened a day or two ago. And that again is not the way to win the hearts and minds of the people in Luhansk and Donetsk. They might. I think that Russia might end up losing those territories as well as a result of this war in the long run. That the Ukrainians could come in and liberate them, because the people there would. It's only really Crimea where they're still treating people properly. They're not really treating them properly in Donetsk or Luhansk. I don't think Russia really had a very strong reason for those places. So, the way I see it, I mean, not me, but summing up, like people like Philip O'Brien and the other people that I'm following, who seem to be pretty knowledgeable, and they seem to be about to capture Izium. So watch out for that in the news in the near future. If you hear that Izium is being captured, then that means there's been a huge setback on the Russian offensive, because Izium was their key point where they're trying to push through and they're trying to encircle. Izium is somewhere there. They're trying to encircle do a big pincer movement around but the Ukrainians are doing the opposite round, and they've pincered their pincer and they've cut off. They seem to have done. It's not 100% sure this is what happened. It's yet to be confirmed. We'll see what the Institute of Study of War says tonight. But it seems that this pincer movement's coming out and cutting off some of these soldiers in Izium, and they may be about to capture Izium or siege it anyway. And so about cut the soldiers off in Izium from the rest of the soldiers, and then take it. It seems to be that Ukraine might be about to do that, and it really looks as if you remember with the Battle of Kiev, that Kiev just pushed back a little way, and then the Russian thing all collapsed. But that was because it had already been made rotten for days, weeks before, because Ukraine had been doing these agile movements of attacking the battalions and attacking their supply lines. So many of the battalions here had maybe a third of their soldiers killed by then, and then a lot of the tanks were destroyed, and then they just weren't getting supplies of food or water, and the soldiers were having to resort to stealing food from shops, and they had to resort to stealing tractors and from civilian farmers to use in the place of armoured vehicles. Of course, they're not really very good as armoured vehicles, but they started doing that because they were so short of equipment. And so, and meanwhile, the farmers earlier on they were driving off the Russian tanks, which had run out of fuel. So earlier on we had the Russian tanks running out of fuel, the soldiers running away, then the Russian farmers coming in and tracking these tanks and pulling them away and giving them to the Ukrainian army. And then we had the Russian soldiers going in and capturing the tractors from the the farmers. So we've had this kind of swaps of tanks to tractors, and so that's why you get this funny meme on Twitter, if you see it sometimes, where you say got this is a meme. It's probably a tractor rally or something. So there's a whole lot of tractors going along the road, and it says this is the Russians with their new equipment or something like that. But I mean, it's one of the you've got to laugh. I mean, you can't be so serious and sad all the time. But it is very sad. But but there's a sense of humour there from time to time. And there were a lot of the ordinary Russian people. There's only 10 Russian soldiers that are responsible for all the Bucha war crimes. It's not like the entire Russian army caused those war crimes. It was 10 people did all those war crimes that you saw on TV. Out of 30,000, I think, that attacked Kiev, out of those 10 did all that. And there would be a few other, a few dozen people here and there. So when you look at the war crimes, it's not like all the soldiers are doing that. And then a lot of the soldiers are very poor people. They don't come from places like Moscow. A lot of people don't realise, or I didn't even realise until recently, that large parts of Russia are basically third world. They're a bit like rural districts of China used to be before China modernised. And they're a bit like North Korea's bits of North Korea. They're quite archaic, quite not very old, they're not very modernised. And for them, some of the Russian soldiers are going around stealing second-hand underwear and second-hand trainers from the civilians, and washing machines, and television sets. They've never seen television sets, and so when they did that big retreat out from the attack on Kiev, there's video, like camera fly on the eye footage, these security cam footage, and there's some of them live, and you can watch them, and they're watching the security cam of the Russian soldiers who'd done that retreat, taking all the things they'd stolen from Ukrainian civilians, all these television sets and electric scooters and things, and wrapping them up and posting them to their families in distant parts of Russia where these were novelties and modern things that they're not used to. So it's a big prize to go back with an electric scooter and put sent in the post. So some of them are very poor people who are and in the warfare, and they're not involved in the war crimes. They're not going around, doing all these horrible things, but they're just going around doing petty stealing of the Ukrainian things. And the Russians are amazed that they go and they think that you can only have a high standard of living if it's all controlled from the top, and they don't understand how you can have all these local councils and local and town councils and so on, and yet people have such a good high standard of living. So that's a big puzzle for the Russian soldiers. So the Russian soldiers, they're not educated, they're not big, they're not wealthy, educated Moscow elites. A lot of them are from very poor areas of Siberia and areas of, very remote rural areas of Russia that haven't really been brought into the 21st century yet. And the Russian equipment, I talked about how the planes, they just do point to point, and they don't have modern methods. And the Russian soldiers, and then they talk over their walkie-talkies, or their radio, or they talk over mobile phones without any encryption. So they may have encrypted radios if soldiers don't know how to use them. They had a very advanced encryption system, but it doesn't seem to work. Either the soldiers don't know how to use them, or they don't have enough encrypted radios, or for some reason, the generals, not just the ordinary soldiers, but the generals are talking in the clear to their soldiers at the front line. And the Ukrainians can just listen in, radio hams can listen in, they sometimes shout back silly things at these generals and at the soldiers, and saying all sorts of things like you're going to lose or whatever, and then the Ukrainian and the Russian generals also, they use cell phones, which are quite easy for the Ukrainians to hack. So that's why the Ukrainians have managed to kill so many Russian generals. And So it's a thoroughly incompetent army. They have ingrained problems all the way through, right down from the bottom to the top. They have no idea about modern battle strategy. They don't seem to understand the idea of an integrated offensive where you have both the air, the ground, air and ground, and there's a third element, I'm not sure, all working together. The Russian soldiers don't seem to have got the idea about that. For instance, their planes, if it was a proper integrated offensive, then the planes would be flying over and making sure that there was nobody around near the... So if they got soldiers doing in advance, then the planes would be going around and making sure there's nothing there to shoot at them. And they'd hit them from above. And then they'd have infantry as well, so very fast, rapid, lightly armoured soldiers going around and making sure that it's safe to 10 kilometres around the tanks or whatever. And then to integrate operations, the infantry, the tanks and the planes, they should all be working together. And the Russians don't have a clue about that. They don't seem to, especially the air power. They don't seem to have any idea about how to enforce air power over a country. It's really quite remarkable. They've got many more planes than the Ukrainians, but the Ukrainians have been flying. They've still got more than half of their planes still flying over 2 months into the war. And the Russians aren't trying to attack the Ukrainian planes. They didn't do a big thorough attack of the Ukrainian airports. They haven't tried bombing runs of the Ukrainian airports. They just seem to be doing this point-to-point bombing, and an awful lot of the bombs that the planes are doing are bombing civilian structures to terrorize the civilians, which have no military value at all. So they just seem to have the idea, we've just got to be barbaric and horrible to the Ukrainians and they'll give up. And it's not working. And they don't seem to have the idea of a modern battle strategy. It's just been extraordinary how incompetent the Russians are. And I mean, the military historians are already puzzling over it, and I think they will be puzzling over this for decades, maybe even centuries to come. This ancient war, there'll be people in the 22nd century lecturing about why the Russians lost in Ukraine and why they lost so quickly. So I think that this is, from what I've seen, they don't have any rabbit they can pull out of the hat. They've got no... China wants nothing to do with all this. So China hasn't got any chips or whatever it is hasn't got any horses in the race. China is on good terms with Ukraine. They are not particularly close. They weren't even particularly close allies with Russia, with the USSR, which was communist. But there were big divisions between the communists, well, minor divisions, but quite significant divisions between the Chinese and the Russian way of doing communism. And then under Putin, there's just a kind of trade connection that they have, and some convenience that Russia sells some military components to you. And it was a military supplier to China after Tiananmen Square massacre, when nobody else was supplying anything military to China, and Russia did. It supplied complete missiles and things, and then they stopped doing that. Now Russia doesn't really trust China so much, so they started supplying just smaller things, and China doesn't trust Russia very much. So they've got a certain kind of connection, a certain kind of trade connection, but they're not very well, not allies. They're nothing like allies. So there's nobody coming in, and India, it's just a trade thing. There's no way India is sending weapons, and none of them will send soldiers. So what we've got there is what Russia's got. Ukraine's getting stronger with every day. Russia's getting weaker with every day. NATO are pretty certain that Russia's going to lose. So with that background, there's no way that Putin... So the main question really is, does Putin know that Russia's going to lose? And he seems still to be in a kind of fantasy, not a delusional, but a kind of believing what he wants to believe, because he would have gone for the peace treaty at the beginning of April if he knew what the rest of the world knows about how bad Russia's army is. If he just believed the public information that the rest of us all know, then he would never have even tried this. And now so it's all out there. The Ministry of Defence, UK Ministry of Defence just got an analysis just now saying that the problem with command structure, I've got that at the end, that's from UK Military of Defence. They're not hiding it, they're just saying that Russia can just go and read it on Twitter. Read what I've just said on Twitter. Putin would get a very good idea of his problems if we just go and read Twitter, of all places. So Russia is, it's really just a question of how much Putin's cottoned on to this. So the Kremlin has certainly dialed down a lot, and they're not aiming for any big announcement. They're saying we're not going to do anything very big, and they're teasing the idea of a new district in Kherson, a new district of declaring Donbass part of Russia, of declaring Mariupol captured. But they might do that. It would be very stupid for them to do that because they're likely to lose these places in the long term. And the thing is, if Putin keeps it vague and just says, that the operation is going very well and we're going to win and we are much better than NATO, and that NATO is losing and Russia is winning, and he doesn't say any specifics, and we're we've nearly denazified Mariupol, and we've already denazified Kiev, which just by walking up to his suburbs he's claiming he's denazified it. If he kind of says something like that, then that's much more likely that we get something like that tomorrow rather than a big declaration that Russia has now annexed part of Ukraine. But it's not impossible, it's just a matter of how misinformed Putin is. If he's still very badly misinformed, he might declare that some regions of Ukraine are part of Russia, and then that wouldn't be very difficult for his regime, because eventually he would lose those regimes. He would lose them. It doesn't seem like he's going to retain any of these areas long term, unless he deports everyone to concentration camps. That's about the only way he could keep them. Which hopefully it doesn't seem likely he's headed that way. Although there are some issues with there's some issues with people being killed and being sent to far distant places of Russia, but to send all those millions of people out there. But we'll see. So that would be the worst case, is that Russia declares the Kherson Oblast and Mariupol, he deports them all to eastern Russia, and they haven't got passports, they're not permitted back again, and then he tries to hold on to these regions. Even then, the war would continue. Russia and Ukraine wouldn't agree with that. They would keep fighting back, and Russia just doesn't have the soldiers for that, because it's not going to get conscripts in time, it's not going to get equipment in time. Within another couple of, Russia lost a third of its soldiers in the first 2 months. That's not just the ones that were killed, but the ones that were wounded as well. In another 2 months, it will only have a third left. The rate, it's continuing about the same rate. It's lost 1,000 tanks so far, and the replacement tanks are mainly ancient ones. They're not, a lot of the ones in storage are not very well looked after. So they used 2,000 of their smart bombs, and there was hardly any left. So their planes are doing these point-to-point missions with dumb bombs. So even if they saw a bridge, say, if they were sent to attack a bridge, they would have to dive down very low, because the bomb can't change direction after it leaves the plane. So they would just have to dive down very low and then probably drop lots of bombs and hope one of them hits the bridge. And if they were 10 meters to one side or 10 meters to the other, they missed the bridge, like in World War II. because their bombs aren't smart. They can't change direction after they leave the plane. They've got a few cruise missiles, and they're sending sea missiles. So anyway, I'll just stop. I'll stop now. It's getting a bit long. I don't want this to be long. Maybe try a shorter one after this. But it's just try to reassure you that so with this background, and Ukraine is getting loads, much better weapons. It's got these howitzers that can fire from a great distance. They're using it to great effect. They destroyed the command. They killed many a general and many officers. Very sad. I mean, it's very sad. I mean, I'm not. I would be a conscientious objector in this war. So I'm not saying. For me, it's very sad that way as well. You've got to think about the Russian soldiers. They set out. They had a military career. They ended up in this situation. Not all of them would be in support of the more extreme things going on. Some of them could well be decent people, and even the ones that are bad people, that are really we'd call bad people who are very. They've somehow over the years they got more and more brutal. But if you look back to World War II, then on the Allies side, that happened to us too, the UK. And with the fires of Dresden, and the people who dropped the bombs and started a firestorm throughout Dresden, that would nowadays be seen as a war crime. And so people gradually over the war, they got more and more used to things like that. So you need to try and be kind to these people. Try to feel kindness in your own heart, even to the people who commit these horrible crimes. And think, they didn't start off like that. They've gone that way. And like even a serial killer, I mean, people have different ideas about such things. But the way I was brought up, my parents, so that was Christianity, and also with Buddhism, is that in Christianity it's that everyone is redeemable. That's the Christian idea. Even a serial killer is redeemable. That Jesus, the love of Jesus, is never, nothing can stop it. No matter what you've done, you can always, it can always come back. It's always open to you. So that's the Christian way of thinking about these things. And then from the Buddhist point of view, then Buddhists think of everyone as already being Buddha, if they could but see. And the only difference is in time. So sometime in the far distant future, in future lives, so that's how Buddhists think about it, in the far distant future, maybe millions of lives from now, many adventures along the way, and these people will find their way to Buddhahood. And they will find their way to the vast openness of wisdom, the vastness of compassion and kindness, unbounding kindness in their heart. They will have that. And so that's going to happen to some point to Putin, some point to these 10 war criminals. That's how Buddhists think about it in the very far future. And then, this is some traditions of Buddhism say that time itself has a kind of, it's not as rigid as we think of it. That far future isn't really so far away from the present as we think of it. It's here. That their future Buddhism is actually here, right now. And that they in their heart are already Buddha. So that's the particular tradition of Buddhism that I belong to, the Nyingmapa tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, and they have ideas like that. And the different ways of thinking about it, different traditions of Buddhism, and then it's said that the great teachers in my tradition, then they help other people mainly by seeing them as Buddha already. And so the Nyingmapa tradition is got a tradition of effortlessness. It's like Zen, indeed it's even more than Zen. And the downside of it is that in the Nyingmapa tradition, then you can get a young person can become very, very lazy. So it's like, you don't need to do anything. Everything is already perfect. I'm perfect. Everything is perfect. You're all perfect and I'm perfect. Everything is fine. So that can lead you to become lazy and sleepy, and you just spend your day sleeping and you think, that is me. Everyone is Buddha already. So that's the Yin thing. But the other way around of it is that it's the relaxation, and it's a kind of like that. Okay, it's going to be billions of lifetimes in the future before I'm going to become a Buddha. But there's all that time, and then just relax into the present, and you've got that long time, but you're just here, just in the present, and don't worry about all that time in the future. And that's another way, and then so the Tibetan in the Yin, but also in all it says the main way that they help other people is by seeing them as being Buddha already. Indeed, they see other people as being Buddha before they see themselves as Buddha. Well, I think that might be a fair way of looking at it. That's really how they become. How you see, once you've seen everyone as Buddha, then so that's sometimes called the shepherd bodhisattva, because a shepherd in this tradition thinks only about their sheep, and so the shepherd bodhisattva in the Yin tradition thinks only about their sheep, and they're not thinking about themselves at all. That's an analogy they use. And then you have the king bodhisattva, who this is someone who realizes, look, I'm not, there's no way that I've got an awful lot of problems and lots of things to fix. There's no way I'm going to be able to help anyone at all. So I should go off and do a retreat for 3 years, or I should go and learn how to, I should become a doctor, say, or if you're a more active kind of a bodhisattva, and you go and train to become a doctor, you train to become a, and so you're that anyway, even with the shepherd, but you're doing it for a different reason. And then there's the Feyman bodhisattva, and that's the idea that you're all in it together. So then you're thinking that we are all doing everything together, and we're all moving together. And so that's neither that you've decided that somehow you've got to kind of improve yourself before there's a chance of really helping anyone else. And then the other way around, that you're just not thinking about yourself at all, and you're just thinking about others, and whether you're capable or not you don't even think about it. And you might take on a job, you might train, or you might learn something, you might learn a skill or whatever, but it's always thinking about others. So that's the shepherd bodhisattva, and it's part of that, and that's what's bringing you along. And then the Feyman bodhisattva, then that's where you it's like a Feyman who, when they get to when they cross the Fey, then they're going over themselves along with everyone else. And then when they get to the other side of the river, then they drop the Fey, and that's them over. So that's the Feyman bodhisattva, where you're a kind of very social way of working things, where everyone is in it together, and you're all moving together. And that's the Feyman bodhisattva approach. So and a bodhisattva is a very, very ordinary thing. The wish to be a bodhisattva. That is just the wish to help others, really, and in the fastest possible way. And if that's what you have in your heart, then that's the bodhisattva path. It's like I was talking about. If you've got, you don't necessarily have kindness for these soldiers. That can be quite difficult. Someone's a war crime, and you might be very difficult to actually develop kindness towards someone who's a war criminal towards Putin or whatever. But just to have the thought in your heart that that's where you want to be headed, then that of kindness towards everyone, that is what Buddhists mean by the Bodhisattva path. That's a Bodhisattva wish. That's the wish of Bodhisattva. Is saying that, you know, that's where I want, that's where I'm headed. Then you start on the path. You're on that path. So the I would, if I was a Christian, I would have gone a long way by Christian ideas. So I am no longer Christian, but I have a very good background in Christianity. So, but the Christian approach is really not. It's very like it's got those same elements. The way the Anglican Church think about it, for instance, and the way the Quakers think about it, they both think of it very much as it's very much like the Shepherd Bodhisattva. And what's that song there? Lord's my shepherd, I'll not wait. And that song that the Christians have. And so they think of Jesus as coming through them, and then but it's very it's a very similar approach, really. That if you're no longer thinking about yourself but thinking about Jesus, and that you're in the world, and your kindness to others, your love and so on, and that is a very similar approach to this idea of thinking about future enlightenment. It's taken away from it all being you. That's the main thing. So you have that in Christianity too, that God, Jesus, then this brings out this whole idea that it's something much faster than your limited idea of yourself. And so you have that in Christianity too. And there really isn't a very big transition from, but in other ways there's a very big transition. Some people, it just depends on how cut up how boxed in your thinking is. So that's the Sarah McInnes became a Zen Buddhist monk, and Zen Buddhist, actually became a Zen master in the Japanese tradition, and she's also a Catholic nun. So those are both Catholic nuns who think of as being a very kind of, you've got if you look at the Catholic Catechism, it's hundreds of pages of things that Catholics believe. It's very, very conceptual. And yet, here's a Catholic nun who becomes a Zen Buddhist Roshi. And then you've got all the Buddhist scriptures for the Zen Buddhism. And most people look at that and think, how could you fit those two together? Because they're saying such different things. But it's very much like what I was talking about earlier on, about, like Buddha, enlightenment in the future. All that vastly billions of years from now, future time being now, then if you have similar kind of approach with conceptual ideas, if you take a Buddhist idea but a Christian would think about it differently, in my next life I might be Christian, I might be Muslim, I might be Jewish. So I could be any of these religions. Like I could be Taoist, I could be Confucian, who knows? Or I might be any religion. I might be a humanist in my next life. So, and of course not believe in past and future lives. So, so that helps you to, that and time being, future time being here also can fit with idea of the future ways of thinking about things can be here as well. And so, if you have that kind of a flexible mind, it is possible to be both Christian and Buddhist. But it's very rare. And in my case, sadly perhaps, I don't have that kind of a mind. So I'd still have very good conceptual ideas of Christianity because I was brought up as a Christian, and because I was Christian for quite a long time, That's why I'm able to help people and connect them to the knowledge. But it's really wonderful when people can do that. So it's really quite remarkable. Someone like Sarah McInnes. Anyway. So I think that was worth saying, because that kind of helps you to, it really makes. I mean, that's if it's really having feeling of kindness towards everyone, even Putin, even the officers, even if you're just aspiring to that, not really having that. It's so much better than having feelings of hate and nurturing the hate. So that makes it very close in and very scary and very dark place. Whereas if you can just start to move a little bit of just not nurturing the hate, not going on and if you keep coming across these scary things, and you may well have, and the fear and the hate, if you that's one of the things with people just searching online, all the clickbait stories, and you might have hate about the journalists too. Well, so try to feel kindness and softness in your mind towards the journalists that write these stories as well. And if you can just move in the direction of kindness. It's the direction that matters, not where you're at. You could have a wonderfully kind mind that has somehow, maybe you've just been very lucky and you're born very kind. So some people are. But then you might start moving in the other direction. And someone else might be born, be just born with a temper. As a child, you've always been destroying everyone else's toys or whatever. And that was just the way you started this life. But then your direction might be the other way. And maybe even you become a criminal. But then, as a criminal, you then there's a wonderful story from Buddha about a mass murderer who became an arhat. I'm not sure if he became an arhat in this life or maybe in a future life, but he got on the path in this life. I have to look up the story. He was a mass murderer who had gone around cutting off people's fingers. He'd killed people and cut off their finger. And he'd done it for a religious reason. His teacher told him he had to get a necklace of 100 fingers, and he had to kill people to get it. So he was following a religious practice that involved killing people. So very, very serious, negative thing to be doing. And there's a rather fine story about how Buddha eventually met this person, and then this person started chasing after Buddha and tried to cut off his finger. But even though he ran as fast as he ran, even though with Buddha not running away, that he never got any closer. And he asked Buddha, how come I'm not getting closer? And Buddha said, well, it's your mind that's racing, or something like that. You'd have to go and I'd have to go and find the actual story. But he's sort of saying, this is all your concepts. It's your mind, your hate is what's causing all your problems, and I'm just staying still. So the Buddha wasn't running away. It was just him. So this was some kind of sort of miracle thing. So I'm not sure what actually happened in real life, but it's rather a fun story. And but anyway, but it's a story about how, and then when he so I may better not tell the story, but yes. So so this would you could imagine it being really quite a big thing for this chap, who killed so many people. So after he'd been a monk for quite a while, then there was a woman who was giving birth. He was having a very difficult birth, and then he said that by the power of me not killing anyone, since I met the Buddha, then you have a good birth. And then it's they just believe that this helped her to have a good birth and not die in birth or anything like that. So you can imagine, again, whether that actually it is possible to influence anyone in that way, whether that's true. And you can imagine what it must have felt like for him after killing so many people, to actually help a woman to give birth just as a monk by praying for her basically, and based on his own not killing anyone, which for most people not killing is not difficult thing to do unless you're a soldier. But if you are a mass murderer and who's got into the habit of it, then it can be quite difficult. It might be quite difficult. So these people, maybe in a future life, they even in this life. So yes, that's why we don't have the death sentence in the UK, but at least that's why most Christians here, and my mother used to volunteer for Amnesty International and felt very strongly about this sort of thing. So so that is both in Christianity and in Buddhism, that people who are war criminals, people who are mass murderers, no matter what they've done, it's all redeemable, as Christians think about, or everyone is already Buddha, or everyone is a future Buddha, depending how you think about it, as Buddhists think about it. So so just try. That's quite a useful. If you're able to, then it makes your mind much softer, and then probably will help a lot with fear and panic and other things that stress you out as well. If you can manage to turn your mind around like that, then that I think helps, especially in a situation where there's this war. If you are in Ukraine and being shelled or whatever, then if you can turn around like this. So in a way, if you can turn around, if you not get angry all the time. I mean, that's one thing I got here about this video. That these fighters, they don't seem to be. They don't seem. It's not they're so bloodthirsty as it were. You know what I mean? They found a moment of peace, a moment to ground themselves in this, even though they're just going to go off and kill someone, probably just now an hour or two later. So even if you are a soldier, there are Buddhist soldiers. Buddhist countries do have to be protected by soldiers. Even if you're a Buddhist soldier, and they of course don't take the vow of not killing, which many lay Buddhists take and all Buddhist monks take. Even if you're a Buddhist soldier, you can ground yourself in kindness in this way. So anyway, yes, as much as you can. I think I've got an article about that. Anyway, I didn't expect this to be anything like as long as this, so I'll upload it now and hope this helps some of you who've got so scared about what happens tomorrow. And then maybe I'll try a shorter one, having launched into this long one totally unexpectedly. I didn't expect this at all.